Pittsburgh Opera presents Puccini's Tosca, October 5th through 13th. Gloria Tosca must free her lover from the clutches of a corrupt police chief. This whirlwind thriller packs romance, dark motives, betrayal, murder, and intrigue into a plot that will keep you on the edge of your seat. See why Tosca is one of the most powerful operas ever. Learn more at pittsburghopera.org/Tosca. Pittsburgh Opera, where can we take you?
Today on CityCast Pittsburgh. For weeks now, it feels like political candidates, debate moderators, and especially the national press just cannot help themselves when it comes to equating Pennsylvania voters with fracking. And a lot of it seems to come back to this town hall in 2019 where Kamala Harris said this.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking.
She now says she won't ban fracking. She's been saying that since 2020 when she joined the ticket with Biden. But outsiders keep talking about it while also pinning the entire election on our Commonwealth's 19 electoral votes. So today we're talking about why fracking has picked up so much steam, how 13 million Pennsylvanians really feel about natural gas extraction, and what the campaigns should maybe be talking about instead. It's Monday, September 30th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. Real quick, before we get to today's interview, it's also a big day here at CityCast Pittsburgh because we are kicking off our fall membership campaign. If you are new here, or even if you're a longtime listener, you may or may not know that CityCast Pittsburgh is supported in part by memberships. It's true that our daily podcast and our newsletter are completely free for anyone in our community, but that's only possible with member support. So all this week, we are asking you to consider becoming a member to support our daily CityCast Pittsburgh podcast and the Hey Pittsburgh newsletter that you know and love. If you're interested, please check out membership.citycast.fm. And listen, if we've ever helped you understand a local issue, maybe introduced you to a guest you loved learning from, or showed you the best of what's happening around town, trust now is the time to please help us out. Because honestly, it is support from y'all that makes it possible to curate all of these local recommendations, all the neighborhood guides, all of the community conversations that you hear from us every day. Like when we inspired a new pizza at a South Hills pizza shop, or when our reporting helped prompt a review of police misconduct. And we are really proud of our work here because as far as we're concerned, we're doing it alongside our listeners and our readers. CityCast is for you, but it is also made by your neighbors. We live here too. So again, joining our member community is the best way to support our daily podcast. And with your small monthly contribution, we'll get to stick around for years to come. Plus, anyone who signs up gets access to our podcast ad-free, no more recommendations in your feed, and you'll receive a weekly members-only events email, that one's brand new, to help you plan your week ahead. We are always looking to expand member benefits too, so you can expect more from us in the future. Just visit membership.citycast.fm to become a member today. Again, that's membership.citycast.fm. Okay, now back to fracking. We're back with Kiley Bense of Inside Climate News. Kiley, does Pennsylvania care about fracking? I cannot say this comes up for my friends and I all that often here.
I mean, I think this is a great question, and I'm so glad that you are doing an episode about this because I think a lot of Pennsylvanians who've been watching the national news unfold during this campaign have been asking this question. Because you're right, it's not something that most Pennsylvanians are talking about every day. Polling on fracking shows that Pennsylvanians are actually really divided on this issue. It's not like every Pennsylvanian or even a majority of Pennsylvanians support fracking. In fact, recent polling kind of shows that it's more in the other direction, that we may be kind of crossing the threshold above 50%, where that larger majority is against fracking.
Yeah, I mean, who is the audience, I guess, for this kind of messaging? Because I feel like fracking feels like a really accepted part of life here. Not that everybody loves it, but like we're all just kind of used to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a political strategy question, basically. It's not that fracking will win or lose you an election in Pennsylvania or in the United States. It's not a wedge issue like abortion. It's not something that when voters go to the polls, they're like, okay, like, how does this candidate feel about fracking? I'm going to decide who to vote for solely based on that position.
Yeah, it's like it's not the single issue most single issue voters are aligned with.
No, definitely not. That's something like abortion or immigration or the economy and inflation. Those are the things that, if you look at polling for what Pennsylvania voters care about, it's those things. Fracking is like way down the list on that list of issues.
Yeah, and let's talk about the technology itself, because, I mean, even though we're used to hearing the word, doesn't mean we actually know what's happening
Sure.
with some of these wells and other things. How does fracking work, and like where is it happening here in Pennsylvania right now?
Sure. So just to back up a little bit, in Pennsylvania, fracking started about 20 years ago. So it's been going on for about 2 decades now, which is why, you talked about earlier, the Pennsylvanians are kind of used to it. It's because it's been going on for 2 decades. And basically what fracking is a process where you inject fluids and chemicals and large amounts of water deep underground to break apart rocks, which will then free natural gas deposits from that rock. And then you're able to extract it. And this is a really transformative technology that opened up these vast shale gas deposits that are under Pennsylvania for drilling that hadn't been accessible before. And so the result was a huge energy boom that led to historic highs for natural gas production in Pennsylvania and has led to Pennsylvania becoming the second largest producer of natural gas in the U.S., behind only Texas.
Yeah, I mean, here in the southwestern PA region, like Washington County, they're still everywhere. There was
Yes.
such a boom in like the 2010s. The oil and gas guys were just like at every bar buying
Yes.
shots. It was a wild time to be out downtown in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. And so the second part of your question, where is fracking happening? It's
Yeah.
largely centered in southwestern PA. If you look at a map of the Marcellus Shale deposit, which is the gas deposit under PA, it's sort of like a diagonal across Pennsylvania. It's concentrated in like the northeast, the northwest, and then the southwest
Of the state.
of the state. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess this debate about it, why are we hearing Pennsylvania mentioned with fracking in this like sort of like 1-to-1 Pennsylvania equals fracking kind of way? Like, why is this like such a thing?
Well, I think it's important to separate the way that the national news media talks about this versus what the political strategy is when it comes to the way the candidates are talking about it. I think sometimes the national news media, like you were saying earlier, they speak about Pennsylvania like it's a monolith and as if this is an issue that is a make or break it issue for Pennsylvania. And
Yeah.
because Pennsylvania's elections tend to be really close, especially with presidential politics, there is some evidence that it could make a difference. But basically, the political strategy that's at play here is to appeal or to scare away those moderate, independent swing voters, which is a small group of people who haven't decided who they're going to vote for president. And so when you're looking at like Donald Trump's strategy or our Republican Senate candidate, Dave McCormick's strategy on fracking, they're bringing this up because they want to paint their opponents as radical or extreme. It's not really about fracking itself. It's more about scaring off these middle of the road moderate voters and saying that their opponents, the Democratic candidates, we can't trust them. And their centrism, particularly in the case of Kamala Harris, is not genuine.
Watching some of these interviews, it kind of felt like maybe fracking was also just sort of the watchword for like an industrial type of job.
Right.
Because, I mean, if you live around here or you've ever been in some of our small towns, like, what it looks like when a factory or a big industrial center shuts down. It's wild how quickly they become ghost towns. So like, it's not, I don't know, maybe I'm just projecting here, but it feels like maybe it's not about fracking. It's about aligning fracking with things like coal and mining and that feeling you get when you go through one of these tiny Mon Valley towns.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there is an effort to connect fracking with job losses and with manufacturing job losses, and also to really connect fracking with the economy. Since the economy is something that voters really care about, if Republicans are able to connect fracking to the economy and make it an economic issue, then that makes it, a more important issue for voters. But as you were talking about earlier in the conversation, when you were saying that, in the 2010s, it seemed like there were all these workers who were setting up and drilling the fracking wells.
Yeah.
One thing about fracking is that it requires a fair amount of workers and employees to be on site to drill the well. But once the well's in production, it doesn't require as many employees. And so, like a lot of extraction technologies, oil and gas industries in general, it does kind of follow a boom and bust type of cycle, especially in accordance with natural gas prices. And so what happens is that when fracking comes to town, so to speak, there might be a boom, but then a lot of those people will leave. They won't stay in the small towns. And so the economic impact of fracking is a really complicated question. And there's been some studies that show that it doesn't have as positive as an economic impact on those small towns as some people would have you believe.
Well, yeah, the New York Times actually just reported on some of that complexity. Natural gas prices are actually kind of low right now. Like, we make so much of it that there just aren't enough buyers or enough ways to get it to them. What does that mean for our communities?
Right. So that basically means that there's less fracking happening right now. I don't remember the exact specifics, but I know that this year there's been less fracking than in the past couple of years. And it's an economic issue. You know, it's supply and demand. It's basic capitalism.
Our favorite word.
Yes. But I do want to mention that, so you will hear sometimes candidates talking about fracking and jobs, and Dave McCormick in particular likes to bring this up and
the
talk
Republican
about,
candidate for Senate running against incumbent Bob Casey.
Yes, exactly. So he brings this up a lot. He loves to connect the fracking issue to jobs, but it's important to remember that fracking, in terms of total employment in Pennsylvania, only employs about 19,000 people, which is a very, very small number. And there's not a lot of evidence that those people are swing voters. Like, there's no evidence that I've seen, at least, that those people are the kind of voters who could be persuaded to vote for other candidates.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Right now, get scary good deals on select Ring cameras and doorbells. See who's there. Keep your scaredy cats company.
Oh, it's okay, sweetie. I'll be home soon.
And protect your crypt from the real monsters.
Oh, come on. The sign says take one.
Save big on select Ring devices right now at ring.com.
So whether it's Harris or Trump, whoever wins, if we are imagining a reality in which the next president does want to ban fracking, if that is one of their goals, can the president even do that? Like, is that a thing that's within their power?
So not really. Most fracking wells are on private land, and only about 24% of fracking wells are on federal land. So the president has limited power to ban fracking. If we were going to ban fracking nationally, Congress would need to be involved. There are some states that have banned fracking, so it could be banned at the statewide level. But in terms of the president's power to directly affect this, it's fairly limited.
Does that mean that Congress could do it maybe, or someone else?
Yeah, Congress could do it. I think that more likely are state bans, which have happened in some states like New York. And then there's also, local governments, municipalities sometimes pass regulations either banning it or making rules about where wells can be drilled, for example.
Yeah. I mean, what does this tell us, this whole debate, this larger piece, tell us maybe about, VP Harris or Donald Trump's potential energy policy? I guess we have Trump's established record to draw on, but I don't know, what kind of president will they be as it relates to energy and the climate and stuff like that?
I mean, I think it's actually pretty indicative. If you look at Harris's comments about fracking, I think they're pretty representative of a balancing act that she's trying to pull off on climate and energy, where she isn't disavowing fossil fuels, but at the same time, she's advocating for transitioning to clean energy.
Which has been a big component of the Biden presidency.
Exactly. Yeah. So the Biden administration has actually made great strides in getting investments in clean energy technologies and renewable energy. It's been huge. really transformative legislation on that issue. But at the same time, under the Biden administration, there's been historic highs of natural gas production, which is something that she mentioned during the debate. So Kamala Harris is kind of trying to walk this line where she says she cares about climate change. She acknowledges that it's a crisis. She's saying, we made these great investments in clean energy, and presumably as president, she would keep doing that. But she's also not saying that she's going to phase out fossil fuels, which from a climate perspective is concerning.
And then Trump, what can we draw on from, the policies that he shared?
Sure. So if you look at his record as president, it's pretty clear what his track record on climate and energy is. He pulled the United States out of the Paris Climate Accords, which was really damaging both to our global reputation and to our ability to fight climate change. And he rolled back hundreds of environmental regulations at the federal level. And both of those things were really damaging. Even though the Biden administration reversed most of those decisions, we're kind of still recovering from those choices. And I think that if President Trump is elected again, we can expect him to go all in on oil and gas extraction, to do everything that he can to get more fossil fuels out of the ground, and not to do anything about climate, and in fact, to probably make it worse.
Is there anything, from your perspective that you wish the candidates were spending more time talking about, especially as it relates to Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so when I see the candidates asked repeatedly whether they support fracking, I find it frustrating because fracking is happening. It's unlikely it's going to be banned on a national level anytime soon. So I'd much rather ask the candidates what they're doing to make fracking less dangerous for communities who live near those wells. In southwestern Pennsylvania, a lot of people who live near fracking wells know the dangers and the concerns about public health that come with living near fracking wells. Kamala Harris, in that town hall where she made those infamous comments, she talked about the harms that fracking can cause. For people who live near fracking wells, there's links to increased rates of asthma, to lower birth rates, to lymphoma, to rashes, to all kinds of different public health symptoms that are really scary. So I would want to ask the candidates, what are they going to do to mitigate those risks? How will they make fracking less dangerous right now?
And then any other energy concerns that you have your eye on that, maybe deserve a little bit more of a national spotlight?
Well, I would love the candidates to talk more about how we can make Pennsylvania more competitive in the clean energy economy. Pennsylvania, and I didn't know this until I happened to write a story about this a couple weeks ago, but we are really behind on clean energy. It's very bad. We're like 45th, 50th. If you look at these stats, behind all the other states, we're doing very badly on this issue.
Is that because we're so invested in traditional methods of fossil fuels, or is it something else?
Well, it's not that, because, for example, Texas is way ahead of us. So it's not a red state, blue state thing. I think it actually may be because of how divided our politics are.
Yeah, we're the only state in the nation with a divided legislature. Republicans control one and Democrats control the other.
Exactly. And so I think that keeps us from accomplishing a lot of things on the state level because we're at loggerheads all the time instead of passing legislation. Other states, even really conservative oil and gas industry positive states like Texas, recognize that it's smart to also invest in clean energy. But I think because Pennsylvania is so divided, we haven't really done that. And we have a long way to go to catch up. So I'd ask the candidates what they would do to help make Pennsylvania competitive in the future.
When you say clean energy jobs, what do you have in mind?
Well, I think that in terms of investments in renewables, like solar, for example, we could be doing more to invest in that industry and make it something that more of Pennsylvanians work in rather than just oil and gas.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a funny one to bring up here in Western Pennsylvania just because we're historically cloudy Pittsburgh area. But that's not quite how solar works.
Right.
Kiley, anything else you're going to be watching for in the near future?
I think I'll just be looking to see if Kamala Harris or if Donald Trump provide any more details about their energy and climate policies and plans. We haven't heard too much from Kamala Harris. I think because Donald Trump was president before, we have a pretty clear idea of how he'll behave as president when it comes to these issues. But with Kamala Harris, we have how she behaved as VP, but we don't really know what her priorities would be as president yet.
Kiley, we really appreciate it. We will link your story in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. I hope you enjoyed it. If you learned anything today, maybe again consider becoming a member of CityCast Pittsburgh. That's membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Talk to you soon. Kiley, can you come back and talk about good environmental news? Is that a thing?